boy sat alone on the edge of a fountain in the center of the village square. It was early evening, and the sun had already begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The villagers bustled around him, going about their daily business, completely oblivious to the fact that the child was crying. He was all alone, and no one even stopped to ask if he was all right. They didn't see his shoulders shaking with sobs or the tears streaming down his dirt-smudged face. The boy was only 8 years old, but his face seemed older than he actually was. His brown eyes, usually sparkling with mischief and life, were dull with misery. His clothes were tattered and his hair, once neatly combed, was now a tangled mess. He looked like a tiny, lost soul wandering in a world that didn't understand him. He spoke a dead language. That's why nobody understood him. He spoke the ancient tongue of Elvish, a language so old that it had been reduced to whispers and bedtime stories and myths. No one in the village knew the language, not a single soul except for the boy. His name was Elian, and he was the last of his kind. He remembered a time when the village was filled with the lilting melody of Elvish, when the trees rustled secrets in that very same tongue, and the stars twinkled stories down from the heavens. But those days were gone, lost to the relentless march of time. He clutched a worn leather book in his hand, its pages filled with the fading script of his ancestors. It was the only thing he had left of them, the only tangible link to a heritage that was slipping through his fingers like sand. The book was filled with tales of valor and wisdom, with songs of love and loss. Each page was a portal to a world that was both familiar and strange, a world that Elian longed to be a part of, but could never truly join. His parents had taught him the language, had sung it to him as lullabies and spoken it to him as they chased away the shadows with its ancient words. But then they had disappeared, leaving Elian alone in a world that didn't speak his language. He wandered the streets, trying to find someone, anyone who understood him, but all he got were confused looks and hurried footsteps. What did he want? What did he need? The villagers whispered, shaking their heads as they passed by. One day, drawn by the sound of laughter, he found a group of children playing near the river. Hope surged through him, and he joined them, speaking to them in the lilting tones of Elvish. But their response was cruel and swift. They mocked him, jeered at him, and called him weird. "Speak properly," they shouted, "or leave." So he did. He spent his days exploring the woods surrounding the village, finding solace in the whispering trees. The trees understood him, or so he thought. One afternoon, as he sat on a moss-covered stone by the river, an old woman approached him. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile, and she didn't mock him for speaking Elvish. Instead, she asked him to teach her. "Why do you want to learn Elvish?" Elian asked, surprised by her interest. "Because it's a beautiful language," the old woman replied, "and I believe it holds the secrets to a long life." And so Elian began to teach her, and as the weeks turned into months, their friendship grew. The old woman, whose name was Amara, was patient and eager to learn. She would sit with Elian for hours, listening intently as he spoke to her in Elvish. Amara lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of the village, and Elian often spent his evenings there. One evening, while they were sitting by the fire, Amara turned to Elian and said, "You know, my dear boy, I believe your language can help our village." "What do you mean?" Elian asked, puzzled. "The people here are sick," Amara said, her voice low. "They've lost hope. If you could use your language to bring them joy, to remind them of the beauty that still exists in the world, it would be a blessing." Elian thought about this. He wanted to help his people, but he also feared that they would mock him if he tried. Seeing his hesitation, Amara placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't be afraid, Elian," she said. "I will stand by you." Her words gave him courage, and the next day Elian began to practice in the village square. He stood on a low wall and recited poems and sang songs in Elvish. At first, the villagers gathered around, some out of curiosity, others to mock him. But as they listened to the lilting melody of his voice, something within them stirred. It was a feeling they had long forgotten, a sense of wonder and awe. Elian continued to sing, and as his voice echoed through the square, the villagers closed their eyes and let the music wash over them. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, then a hesitant clap, then another. Soon, the entire square was filled with applause. The villagers, their faces alight with smiles, thanked Elian and begged him to sing more. From that day on, Elian became the heart of the village. He performed in the square every day, bringing joy and laughter to the people. And although he was still the only one who understood the language, the villagers loved to listen to him. One day, a young man named Kellen approached Elian. Kellen was strong and handsome with a quick smile and eyes that twinkled with mischief. He was everything Elian wasn't: confident, outgoing, and popular. "I want to learn Elvish," Kellen said. Teach me. And so Elian began to teach him, just as he had taught the old woman. Kellen proved to be a quick learner, and soon he, too, was reciting poems and singing songs in Elvish. One evening, after a performance in the square, Kellen took Elian aside. "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice serious. Elian nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I'm leaving the village," Kellen said. "I want to travel the world, see all there is to see, do all there is to do." Elian felt a pang of sadness. He liked Kellen, and he would miss him. "Will you come with me?" Kellen asked, his eyes shining with excitement. Elian hesitated. He had never left the village. The thought of seeing the world was exciting, but terrifying. "Please, Elian," Kellen pleaded. "We can explore ancient ruins, discover lost cities, maybe even find treasure." Elian thought about it. Traveling with Kellen would be an adventure, and maybe, just maybe, he would find someone else who spoke Elvish. So when the sun rose the next morning, Elian and Kellen set off on their journey. They walked for days, weeks even, and during that time, they learned so much from each other. Kellen taught Elian about the world beyond the village, and Elian taught Kellen about Elvish. One evening, as they sat around a campfire, Kellen turned to Elian and said, "I'm glad you came with me. You make the journey an adventure." Elian smiled. He was glad he had made the journey, too. As the years passed, Elian and Kellen traveled all over the known world. They saw ancient ruins and discovered lost cities. They met all kinds of people, some who were kind and welcoming, others who were cruel and unfeeling. But through it all, Elian never forgot his language. He continued to speak Elvish, and slowly but surely, he began to attract the attention of others. One day, while traveling through a dense forest, Elian and Kellen came across a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a large oak tree, and beneath the tree sat a group of people. As Elian and Kellen approached, they heard the leader of the group say, "We have been searching for you, Elian." Elian stopped in his tracks. "Searching for me?" he echoed. "Yes, we've been looking for the last speaker of Elvish," the leader replied. "We are scholars and historians, and we have heard tales of your extraordinary gift." Elian felt a surge of pride. He had never thought of himself as having a gift, but these people obviously thought highly of him. "We would like to invite you to come with us," the leader continued. "We are traveling to a great city where there is a school for languages. There you can study Elvish, learn about its history, and develop its future." Elian looked at Kellen, who nodded encouragingly. This was an opportunity Elian had never imagined possible, and he knew that he couldn't pass it up. So with a mix of excitement and apprehension, Elian agreed to go with the scholars. As they journeyed toward the great city, Elian couldn't help but feel a sense of destiny. He realized that he wasn't just a lonely boy who spoke a dead language. He was a keeper of history, a living link to his ancestors and their ancient tongue. He may have been the last speaker of Elvish, but he was far from alone. He had friends, he had scholars who revered him, and he had a legacy that he was determined to honor. And so, with a heavy heart, yet hopeful for the future of his language, Elian bid farewell to Kellen and embarked on a new chapter in his journey, one that promised to be filled with challenges, discoveries, and the enduring power of language. Ouija boards, a source of cheap thrills for teenagers or a gateway to the darkest depths of hell. In this video, we're gonna find out if this board really is cursed. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more paranormal videos. Now, we all love a good ghost story, but when it comes to ghost stories that are centered around objects, well, they're just better because you can hold them. It feels more personal somehow. And one of the most popular cursed items in the world has to be the Ouija board. These boards have been credited with summoning demons, spirits, and even gods. Some claim that they work, while others say they're a mere parlor game. But there is no denying how popular these boards are. This specific board was made by the Kennard Novelty Manufacturing Company, and it is known simply as the talking board. It was patented on March 23, 1891, and would become the first commercially produced Ouija board ever. The board's name was actually a combination of the French and German words for yes, oui, and ja, but soon after its creation, the board would take on a life of its own. In 1901, a man named Elijah Bond began writing a story about the talking board, a fictionalized account of his experiences with the board, and what he wrote would become the blueprint for every Ouija board story told since then. The spirit of a young girl named Helen was summoned onto the board, and she communicated with Mr. Bones through the planchette, which is the piece that moves across the board. But one day, Mr. Bones accidentally contacted a demon instead, and the demon proceeded to wreck his house. The demon ripped up carpets, knocked over furniture, and shattered pictures hanging on the walls. And eventually, the demon revealed its true form to Mr. Bonus, who escaped, leaving the demon trapped in the board. After that, the board became incredibly dangerous. Anyone who touched it was met with madness, illness, or death. And apparently, the only way to get rid of the demon is to destroy the board. Mr. Bonds did this, burning the board and scattering the ashes. And yet the demon still lived on, possessing anyone who came into contact with its remains. The story was published in the Detroit Free Press, and many people were freaked out, throwing away their boards en masse. Sales plummeted, and the Kennard Novelty Manufacturing Company would eventually go bankrupt. But then something interesting happened. People started claiming that the original board had been destroyed, but new boards were coming into production. And if you didn't believe that the board was cursed before, you kind of have to now, right? Now, this is where things get a little hazy. There is no evidence that any of this actually happened, at least not in the way that it's been written. Yes, there was an Elijah Bond, but he never wrote that story. It was actually written by a reporter for the Detroit Free Press. And yes, the company did go bankrupt, but there is no record of why. It could have been because they were a novelty item and the fad wore off. Or maybe it was because they were associated with the devil. But the fact of the matter is, there's no proof that this story is anything but fiction. So if there isn't a dark history behind the talking board, why are so many people afraid of Ouija boards? Well, the answer might be simpler than you think. You see, back in the early 1900s, spiritualism was all the rage. Spiritualism is basically the belief that the dead can communicate with the living, and it was very popular during the Victorian era, in part because there were no government regulations regarding so fake mediums could pose as seers and channel spirits whenever they wanted. There was also another reason that people were so desperate to make contact with the other side, and that was because the Civil War had taken so many lives. Families were torn apart, and everyone was looking for some kind of closure. And what better way to find that closure than with a talking board? Before long, these boards were flying off the shelves. People from all walks of life bought them, from farmers to actors to even presidents. Theodore Roosevelt was supposedly gifted a Ouija board by his children, but he threw it out when he realized that it was just a trick. But not everyone was so skeptical, and there were many reports of people being attacked by evil spirits. And if you needed proof that these incidents were occurring, all you had to do was pick up a copy of the New York Sun, because that's exactly what they reported. They ran story after story of people who tried to use the Ouija board for fun, and ended up contacting demons instead. These stories gave rise to the modern idea of the curse, that once a board is used, it can never be cleansed. Of course, these stories weren't real, but neither were the ones we shared earlier. The whole thing was a publicity stunt by the paper to sell copies, and it worked brilliantly. In the end, the Kennard Novelty Manufacturing Company was able to stay afloat until World War II, although they were never quite as successful as they were in the beginning. But even if the story was made up, does that mean that the curse isn't real? Well, let's take a look at some of the claims that have been made over the years. For starters, we have this man here. He claimed that his friend's sister died after using the board. He said that he found her dead in her room, and on her nightstand was a Ouija board. And that wasn't the only death that was blamed on the board. This woman claimed that her husband took his own life after using the board. She said that he'd become increasingly depressed after playing with the board, and eventually he couldn't take it anymore, and ended his life. But again, just because someone died after using a Ouija board doesn't mean that the board is cursed. Correlation does not equal causation. But what about those who claim that they've experienced strange phenomena after using the board? Take this woman, for example. She said that she was using the board to communicate with her deceased father, but instead she contacted a spirit that proceeded to berate her. She tried to end the session, but the planchette moved on its own and spelled out, "No, you will not leave." At that point, she began screaming, and the spirit vanished. Or what about this guy? He was using the board to play around with his friends when suddenly the lights flickered and went out. When he turned the lights back on, the planchette had moved and spelled out, "I am God." Now of course, these stories sound terrifying, but there are rational explanations for everything that was described. As for the lights flickering, it could have just been a coincidence. It happens sometimes. And as for the messages that were spelled out, well, there's something called the ideomotor effect. Basically, when you think you're moving an object, your brain tricks you into thinking that you're moving it with perfect smoothness. But in reality, your movements are jerky and inaccurate. Because of this, your brain fills in the blanks, making it seem like you're moving the object perfectly, even though you're not. Your brain also plays tricks on you when you're retrying to read the message that's being spelled out. You see, you don't actually see letters, you see shapes. Your brain then interprets those shapes as letters, So it's entirely possible that someone could move the planchette to spell out a message, but the person communicating with it wouldn't realize that they were doing it. They would swear up and down that the message was coming from a spirit. Of course, this doesn't prove that Ouija boards aren't cursed, but it does show that there's a perfectly natural explanation for every single phenomenon that has ever been attributed to them. But if you don't want to risk it, we're not going to tell you how to live your life. If you don't want to use one, don't use one. But if you do, just remember that you might be the one cursing it. Now go watch what actually happens when you die. Or click this other video instead. Welcome back to my channel, where we share all the paranormal, scary, and creepy things. Today I will be sharing with you the ritual that went wrong. This is a true story from Reddit. So let's jump into it. I am an atheist. My grandfather was an atheist. My father was an atheist. I have been raised in a very religious household, but I do not believe in any gods. I recently visited my parents for Christmas. They are aware of my beliefs and they do not force me to go to church or anything like that. But this year they decided to invite their friends over for a Christmas Eve dinner. It's a tradition for them to say grace before meals and invite everyone to pray if they wish. I always just sit there politely and keep quiet while everyone else prays. This time when they were saying grace, one of their friends asked if I could pray because she had heard that I did not believe in God and wanted to hear what I would say. I said no, thank you. I wasn't going to start some kind of argument or make a scene, so I stayed silent during the prayer. Later on, after I went to my room, I started getting messages from people on various platforms. One of them wrote, "Hey, you pray on Christmas dinner next week." Another one said, "You should really consider praying at the Christmas dinner, otherwise people might think you are evil." And another one said, "It's the least you can do since your family invited others into their home. You should respect that by praying." I responded to all of them by saying that I wasn't going to argue about religion, and I didn't want to make a scene. On Christmas morning, I went to church with my family, but I spent most of the service on my phone playing games. When the pastor asked if anyone had a prayer request, I started writing a message to him, asking him to not ask me to pray. I told him how disrespectful it was to ask me to pray and how it made me feel uncomfortable. He saw me writing on my phone, and he stopped. He then proceeded to ask me to stand up in front of the entire church and pray. I refused. He continued to insist, so I left the church. My parents called me later to see why I had left, and I told them I had enough of being pressured to pray. My mother was furious and said that I was being extremely disrespectful and rude to both her and her friends. She said that I was making a big deal out of nothing, and that it was just a simple prayer. My father said that I was being ignorant and selfish, and that I should have just prayed even if I didn't mean it. I told them that if they invited people into their house again, I wouldn't be coming over anymore. They said that I was making them look bad in front of their friends and that I needed to fix that. A few hours later, I got a call from my mother. She said that her friend had talked to her husband about what happened and he said that I should be banned from their house forever. I responded by telling her that she shouldn't have invited someone who would try to force me to pray. She hung up on me. A little while later, she called me again. She told me that they had discussed what had happened and said that I had to apologize to their friend and pray with them. Otherwise, I would no longer be allowed to set foot in their house. I told her that she had to choose between me and her friend, because I was going to apologize. She told me that they had chosen her friend and that I should find somewhere else to stay. I replied that I had already found somewhere else to stay and that I was fine with that. After the call ended, I drove to my girlfriend's house. She has her own place now, and I moved in with her after I broke up with my last boyfriend. Her parents are also good friends with my parents, and they knew what had happened. They offered for me to stay with them until my mom calmed down. I thanked them for their offer but declined because I really didn't want to be a burden. The next day, I drove back to my parents' house to pick up my stuff. My mom opened the door and immediately started yelling at me. She kept calling me names and telling me how much of a problem I was. She told me that I had ruined her friendship with someone I didn't even know. I tried to explain that I didn't ruin the friendship. She ruined it herself by inviting someone who forced me to pray against my will. She told me that I was too proud and stubborn to admit I was wrong, and that I would pay for that. Then she slammed the door in my face. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what she had said. Then I picked up my phone and called my girlfriend. She answered and I asked her if I could come over. She sounded surprised and asked if everything was okay. I told her that my mom had thrown me out and that I wanted to come over. She said that I could come over, but that I had to talk to her parents first. I thanked her and ended the call. I took a deep breath and called her parents. Her dad answered and I explained the situation to him. He was silent for a moment and then he told me to come over. When I arrived, her parents welcomed me with open arms. I hugged her mom and dad and thanked them for letting me stay with them. Her mom looked at me and said that it was going to be all right. I nodded, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. I knew that my mom would never forgive me for refusing to pray. Her mom looked at me and said, "You know, your mom called us yesterday. She was crying and she told us that you had been kicked out of the house." I nodded. Yeah, I guess I didn't make it very clear that I wasn't staying there anymore. I'm sorry about that. Her mom shook her head. Don't apologize. It's not your fault. Your mom is overreacting. I'm sure everything will be fine. Why don't you go take a shower, and then we can talk? I did as I was told and took a shower. When I came out, her dad was waiting for me with a glass of water. Thank you, I said. No problem, he replied. Your mom really cares about you. Don't worry. That night, her mom and dad called my mom and dad. I stayed in the other room while they talked. After they ended the call, her dad looked at me and said, "Your mom wants you to move back in with her. She says that she's sorry about what she did, and that she doesn't want you to live with us anymore." I shook my head. No, I'm not moving back in with her. She kicked me out. I'm not going back. Her dad sighed. Okay, if you don't want to go back, then don't. But please understand that your mom is worried about you. She loves you very much. That's why she did what she did. I nodded, but I didn't say anything. Her mom put her hand on my shoulder. You're a good kid, and we're glad that you're here. Just promise us that you'll be careful and don't do anything stupid. And that's what happened. I never moved back in with my mom. She never apologized for what she did, and I still don't believe in any gods. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button.